Huge spoilers ahead for Cyberpunk Edgerunners. Duh. In case you live under a rock, you've probably at least heard of the new Cyberpunk Edgerunners anime. You've definitely heard of it because of the nature of the ever-present algorithm at every instance watching you to best learn what you like and recommend you more of it, give you new things, keep you on its site. How convenient, am I right? Now, I don't have an issue with the anime. It's actually amazing. It's one of the few shows that I absolutely fell in love with in the first few episodes and had stick with me, which is why my silly little self is sitting at my silly little computer writing a script at 1 in the morning. This essay isn't about the end or a theory. There's already dozens, if not hundreds, of essays about this. This essay is about the cinematography and brilliance of Maine's death in episode 6. Let's talk about salt. Salt was the crux of power, the center of business. The nature of the world is absurdly complex and multifaceted, but one facet of this world is that business is often fueled by power and greed. Power is a hunger that consumes it and much around it, and because of this, salt ruled the world. Salt made food, salt made money, salt made unbelievable power. The shift from feudal to modern commerce, capitalism evolving, well, the crux of power changed. Salt was cheapened, food was expanded, the scarcity vanished. Salt was just old news. Now you could argue that the power, the obsession, is now in oil or microchips, but we can also argue that the obsession is no longer an actual, tangible subject. The object of power and obsession now is the line that signifies the value of a stock. Cyberpunk as a setting is defined by the new obsession and is a satirized view on what the businesses see as the new gods, at least in the American sense, and the natural corruption that comes with business not regulated, a uniquely American issue. It's uncomfortable to admit, but we are some transhumanism, better body mods, and a few flimsy, silly little laws away from being in a reality close to cyberpunk. Something that for now thankfully remains in the realm of satire. It's a very serious satire, though, and this satire has a historical precedent in America. In ancient times, 1921, on August 25th, a century, a year, a month and some change at the time of recording, the Battle of Blair Mountain happened. This was the largest armed uprising in America since the Civil War. It all started back in 1890 when coal miners successfully founded the National Miner Workers Union. But because workers having right for even a second slows the profit and hinders the crux of power, this was of course seen as very bad and evil by all the rich people who jerk themselves off with oil. Mines in Mingo County, West Virginia, considered union membership immediate grounds for termination. The towns in Mingo County were mostly company-owned, so being a unionist not only meant you lost your job, but you would also lose your home, because the company owned everything, and only didn't own you on paper. You did not do anything but give your money to the company. You did not make any money but from the company. The company was oppressive and totalitarian, constantly around you, always watching. You could never escape the company's shadow. The company kicked them around as they pleased. This eventually backfired. 10,000 miners got guns. They faced down the company and fought for their rights. This was so widespread that it wasn't one incident or a dozen. It's known historically as the Cold Wars. The story ended happily, I guess, after 100 deaths, 100 human beings dying just to be treated as human. Workers' rights were eventually solidified, only for some brainless yokels who never suffered a day in their lives a century later to want to undo that for the sake of convenience and profit. And when that happens, the corporatism, profit-driven aspect that has historical roots in the Cold Wars and SALT has the opportunity to leap yet again into reality. We are slowly being pushed away from human and workers' rights in America. Very slowly, and we haven't lost them, not yet at least, but you wouldn't be unjustified in being terrified of losing these rights. Cyberpunk is a world stuck in the in-between. 10,000 people haven't gotten their guns yet, but they definitely don't have their rights. Companies are still oppressive, all-watching, all selfish. This backdrop guarantees most characters have trauma related to it, which allows me to finally mention Maine. The imagery of Edgerunners, I'm gonna be blunt, is fucking insane. I rewatched this episode and turned on my author's brain and loved it. This might sound like a statement worthy of a Circle Jerk subreddit, but you can genuinely learn a lot about the future and past of the story just by putting your eyes on the screen. Prime example, and another huge spoiler, David's hallucinations when he starts to get on the edge of psychosis as an array of guns, a very similar collection of guns attached to the exoskeleton that seals his fate and kills him. Back to Maine, though. Maine's hallucination is of him running in a desert. Him before all the modifications, all the pain. The episode progresses and Maine keeps slipping. The desert and road are constant, oppressive, and lifeless. It should be pretty obvious, but the desert is an allegory for Maine's life under the weight of bloated corporatism. The music choice itself is brilliant as Maine flashes between desert dreamscape, hallucination, and reality. The music eerily asks, media, I believe, has gone soft. It's scared to kill characters, and Edgerunners as a series broke that mold in an uncomfortably pleasant way.
None leave the slaughterhouse. Not alive.
Not even Maine, a mentor character we all came to love. As Maine continues off the edge of the cliff of sanity, he keeps running in this dream, but now the road is ending. Again, the metaphor should be obvious. The show is telling us he's dead before it says it. Maine's empty life of running under the weight and heat of the world that would kill him if it could is over. Before I go any further, let me touch on music choice in its own little section. I watched and waited eagerly while Cyberpunk was being developed and when it dropped. I was then kicked violently in the balls, but one thing I really appreciated was how much experimental and really good music the game funded. Lots of indie artists got a moment in the spotlight because of Cyberpunk's funding. Edgerunners could have gone a different route and made its own soundtrack, but it used the biggest thing the game got right. The music. Every song with vocals is in the game, even some without are too. The song that plays as Maine succumbs and in the future as David does the same as Major Crimes, a song that asks if there's a way out, a question we already know the answer to. And then there's the music that plays during Maine's death itself. It doesn't have words, questions, or anything other than a looming sense of finality. It's a post-rock dirge that stares you down while the boat sinks. It only speeds up, it only screams once the end arrives. The death itself is within the desert dreamscape. The post-rock dirge named Ugori plays ominously as David tries to save Maine, but the road is gone. There's no more running. Not for Maine. As the end arrives, and as the Reaper calls his name, Maine tells David to keep running. His last fevered hallucinations are of David just doing that, running into the same heat and oppression, running from the pain, because once he stops running, he's dead. David as a character is a shell. Unlike most protagonists who have their own goal, David never gets to dream his own dream. He simply does things to do them until the end of the line. In this sense, Maine and David are alike. Maine never has his own set dreams other than survival, and Maine, as he's hallucinating at the end of the line, sees David as someone just like him, and in need of guidance. He gives this guidance the best he can, but he dooms David to the very same fate with this moment. Maine has been running through the barren waste his entire life, and his final act sends David running down it as well. I said this earlier, but the hot, lifeless desert is an allegory for Night City. It's the death and ritual sacrifice of all for the line. The Saka Corpo says it perfectly.
No matter how high you rise or believe you can, you will never escape our shadow.
Part of what has made the cyberpunk setting so relevant and relatable is that we already suffer under the same boot. Despite the middle class in America dying off, corporate profits are at an all-time high. Chemicals that will never leave the rainwater or the earth are now all around us. The waste infects us with a debit card's worth of plastic a week inside of you. Mental illness is at an all-time high, and while at one point we could say that this was because of heightened awareness, it's now almost certainly because life is just undoubtedly getting worse. What makes David so real and so human is that, just like most people, he's handed this trauma in a crushing and brutal world and told to just keep running. David, like the average person, never even gets the opportunity to dream. He just has to fight for survival. He never even figures out what he really wants. Corporatist society doesn't let people dream. It doesn't let them live. It only lets them run and try to find moments of beauty in this world before they pass on the trauma and life ends. The imagery of Maine's death connects to the very, very real death of dreams and passing on of trauma we experience in our own society as day by day it feels like the end of a golden age is about. The music thematically beats you up and juices the happiness out of you, and the beauty of the art lets millions get together around a screen and realize that we're all in it together, some way or the other.
Hi, it's me. I'm the guy who made this video. First of all, I'd like to say thank you so much for watching all the way through my video essay. It really does mean the world to me that I can make these silly little videos and they get the silly little views that they do and that people appreciate them. So genuinely, thank you so much for watching. If you're new here and you haven't already, go ahead and just subscribe. It's completely free. You can always undo it if you hate my guts later. I'm staring at a bright light bulb as I speak to you right now. Sometime in the past, little words broadcasted into the future. Moving on, huge thanks to my, at the time of recording, 6 patrons. Their names are on screen right now. It is with their contributions and donations that I am able to fund my silly little misadventures online. If you'd like to join the Patreon, links always down in the description down below. No pressure though. I don't like locking content behind paywalls, because I grew up dirt poor, baby. Now, I really wanted to push myself to make something that I would genuinely be proud of making when I made this video, and I feel like I did. I am very happy with how this turned out. I pushed myself a lot in the editing aspect to make something that I had never made before, and I'm really proud of how it turned out. So whether this gets a few hundred views or a few thousand, thank you so much for being here with me and watching. It really does mean the world to me. Again, thanks for being here. Have a great time. Until next time, memento mori.